Let's
I
get
don't know what time it is.
it's 1:01.
Okay, I'm ready if you are.
Okay, perfect. So happy Friday, ladies. What a great way to kick off our holiday Halloween weekend by chatting with none other than Alice Hoffman about the Book of Magic, which was released on October 5th. I have it right here. Love the cover. I have an advanced copy of it. So Alice, before we get started, I always like to thank my moderator, who's Jennifer Clonch, and she's down in Texas. I think she's watching right now, but she helps kind of with the group entirely. She runs our Instagram page, and I couldn't do this without her. And then a big thank you to all the moms joining us live, and thank you to those who have already recommended the book and read it and loved it. And thank you to those who are joining in after the fact on our YouTube page who maybe couldn't join us live. And of course, thank you to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and chat about the Book of Magic. So let's get started.
All right, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I think you're in, we're not too far apart. I'm in Canton, Massachusetts, and you are in...
Yeah, I'm in Boston.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we could have been doing this live.
We both have terrible weather.
Exactly. So I always like to start my author chats and ask you to share a little bit about your path that led you to becoming a writer, and a little bit about your personal story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. I never, ever thought I could be a writer. I didn't think someone like me could be a writer. I was a reader, and that's kind of why I became a writer. I was in love with books. I went to the library all the time. It was my way of escaping. I had an unhappy childhood. So, I escaped into books all the time. And I guess I felt like, I wanted to write, but it was so long ago, but when I was in school, we barely read any women. I mean, I think we read Willa Cather, but there was no like women. I didn't think someone like myself could ever be a writer. And yet I still, kind of was in love with books. So I started writing. And I think when I was about 15, I wrote a terrible story about the end of the world. And I sent it to Esquire magazine, which I had never read, never really seen. I had just heard about it. And I got a personal letter back from someone, a really nice letter, because it treated me like I was a real writer. And the person said to me, when you stop fooling around, because I didn't use any capital letters, I don't think I knew you're supposed to. When you stop fooling around, send us another story. And I never did send another story, but I just felt someone out there in like New York City thinks I'm a writer. And that was very inspirational for me. It made me feel like maybe I could do that.
And so you did.
I did. I know. Yeah. I didn't expect to go to college, which I did. I went to night school. I went to Adelphi University on Long Island. I'm still very involved with them. We run a writer's workshop for high school juniors every summer, which I'm really thrilled about, because it's exactly what I wish had been around when I was in high school. And then I went to California, went to Stanford and did my graduate work out there, and was lucky enough to have a great mentor who just really helped me with my career. I just never would have been here without him. So I think sometimes a teacher can just change your life, and that's what happened to me.
Oh, that's amazing. I would love to circle back at the end and maybe share more information with our, I happen to have 2 teenagers, but we have moms of all ages. So would love to share some more information about the writing program. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because we often ask, we have a lot of budding writers, it seems, and then, so that would be a great way to kind of share that. So
Yeah.
we'll circle back, and maybe you can send me that website. So I kind of, just doing a little bit of research, I was looking back at the first novel you ever wrote was called The Property of, which is, and I must confess, I haven't read it yet, but I was researching it. I was like, I got to go read this next. It looks fantastic. Is a coming of age novel of a teenage girl whose life goes down a wrong path. And kind of looking back at all of your work, how do you feel about this novel now? And for many of you watching, you may not know that, Alice, you write young adult and adult fiction. Is that fair to say?
It is, although I think there's such a fine line between what's young adult and what's adult fiction these days, because I know I read a lot of young adult fiction.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of adults read my books that are kind of were meant for teens, but I think there's such crossover. Um, so I don't know. My first book, I wrote it when I was in graduate school. I was 21. I think it was published when I was 23. I never expected it to be published. And what happened to me was my great professor, whose name was Albert Gerard, sent a piece of it as a story to City College, their magazine called Fiction. And they published it. And then I got a letter from a very famous editor named Ted Solotaroff, who wrote and said, "Do you have a novel?" And I wrote back and said, "Yes, I do." And I started writing that day really fast because I thought, this is my chance. This is the door opening. It may never happen again. I didn't think about getting published really because things were different then. And so I wrote for 6 months very fast. I also was in graduate school and I was working in a department store and I had another job, I had like 3 jobs. And I sent it to him. He worked on it with me for about a year. Ultimately, he didn't take it, but he sent me to my agent and she sold the book to Farrar, Straus and Giroux and it was published, which was, the whole thing was just kind of like my head was spinning. And I haven't read it in a long time. The funny thing is that I'm going to read it this weekend because somebody was interested in it to possibly do a film. And I thought, I think I have to read this to remember it. But it's about a girl in an urban neighborhood who gets involved with the wrong people, with a street gang and with drugs. And it's, this coming of age story that I think it's almost kind of like a mythic story. It's almost like a fairy tale rather than a realistic story.
And I mean, I think that fairy tale and kind of that component in the wrong path versus right path, it seems to me, that's why I think I'm so fascinated to go read it now. Maybe set you kind of on your course, of kind of the magic and witchcraft and the supernatural that you have, a big piece of your career is focused on. So
Yeah.
I have to ask, like, where did your passion, you have to be passionate about magic and witchcraft and the supernatural to have written about it so prolifically. So has that always kind of been something in your life or?
Yeah. And actually I was cleaning at my house at the beginning of COVID, having nothing better to do. And I found this drawing that I had done in first grade and it was of a witch with a black cat and a bat. And I just thought, I have had the same material my whole life. This has been my interest my whole life. And, part of the reason was, I grew up with fairy tales and folk tales. And I had a grandmother who told me stories that sounded very magical to me, a Russian grandmother. So I think kind of what you read when you're really young affects you so deeply. And so it's always been what I'm interested in. And I'm also interested in women's stories and kind of being able to tell the stories of women who didn't have a voice, who weren't allowed to have a voice. So I think that's very true for, people who were judged to be witches, they didn't have a voice. And so I think that's a big interest of mine.
And obviously you've done a lot of research over the course of your career on the subject matter. I have to assume because just even just the reference to the libraries and the books and the hidden books and accessing them all and so super interesting. So you're a master storyteller and obviously have a prolific career. When you wrote the first book in this series, the Magic series, Practical Magic, I believe that was in 1995. So we're now, just past 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Did you sit down knowing that there was multiple stories that you planned to tell, or was it originally just going to be Practical Magic, and how did that evolve?
Yeah, it was just going to be Practical Magic. If I had known it was going to be a longer series, I would have taken notes. I would have made an outline. I would have built the world. This made it much more difficult because whatever I had written, 25 years ago, I had to stay true to, and that was difficult. And sometimes I didn't want to. The only reason I really started to think about writing more books about the Owens family was because readers kept writing to me and saying, I think there's more. We want a sequel. We want to know what happens. And instead of writing a sequel, I wrote 2 prequels because I'm very interested in how families get to be the way they are and what our histories are. And I think a lot of people are. I think that's why so many people, are into genealogy, and they kind of want to find out, well, how did I get to be me? And so I went back in time for 2 books, and now the Book of Magic, my new book, is kind of closure for the family. It's the end of the story, and that was kind of hard to write, knowing that it would be the end for me after more than 25 years of writing about this family.
I can only imagine. One of our questions from our mothers was, do you have an Owens family tree that you reference? And does one exist? Could we share it, or could we see it? And I did some searching and I didn't find anything, but is there one that you have?
Make one up. We did do it for this one, just to kind of, and I was going to put it in the book, but then I realized if you looked at the family tree before you read this book, you would know things. It would be like a spoiler, you would know who married who and who had children with whom. And it just seemed like it could ruin it for some people. I don't know if maybe it should be in the paperback edition, but I just kind of was afraid I would give the story away if I gave the family tree away.
Oh, that's so interesting, but it does make sense for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that the avid fans want one, would love to see that at some point. So maybe a year from now, 6 months from now,
Yeah.
we could see that. All right. So when you sat down to write the Book of Magic, specifically, what did that process look like? Because did you have an outline and a clear kind of path of where you were trying to did you know what the ending was and how you were going to get there? And then obviously with so many different characters and different settings, did you write each individual story and then at the end weave it together?
I thought I knew where I was going. This happens to me a lot. I usually have an outline, or I have something, kind of a game plan for everything. But in the end, I wound up throwing out the last 100 pages and rewriting them with a new 100 pages. I thought I knew the ending, but I really didn't know the ending. So that's kind of what's enjoyable for me. It's like, I feel that way as a reader, I'm turning the pages so that I see what happens next. And as a writer, I also feel like it's the same thing. I feel like I want to find out what happens next.
So talk a little bit though then about, okay, like it wasn't linear the way you wrote it. I can't imagine, was it? I mean, it wasn't chapter to chapter. You must have.
It was pretty linear.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty linear.
That's so you kind of interwove the 2 stories, because like with each chapter, traditionally, or not traditionally, it's kind of moving between the characters. So
Yeah.
I guess in thinking about it, I was like, she must have written, Jet's story and where that
No,
finished. And
no.
no, okay.
Because for me, it was like kind of chronological. It was like they were all in the same time. So it was like time was moving forward, and that was it. So I didn't do it character by character and then kind of weave it together. I think that would be so hard to do. That would be like knitting a sweater, that had no arms or something, and then you had to put the arms on at the end. Yeah, that would be hard.
Yeah, it's been interesting as we've been talking to people, some of the authors that do that, and I'm always like, wow, how? But in this case, I felt like there were so many characters. It's a lot for you as a writer to kind of keep track of as well.
Yeah.
So the book kind of begins at the end and reintroduces the characters, along with then kind of focusing on the granddaughters who've been, I'm trying not to give anything too much away, but they've been sheltered from their families' heritage, if you will. But at the funeral of Jet, the family curse begins to be exposed.
Yes.
And from here, the story launches, and we visit Paris and we visit London, and it's so amazing because you literally feel like you're in those places as you're reading, and your use of descriptive settings just truly make you feel like magical, and the auras around. So talk a little bit about, did you travel? I'm sure you've traveled to those places at some point in your life, but
Yeah,
talk a
well,
little bit about setting for you.
yeah, for me, writing this book, as you know, during COVID, it was great to be able to travel when I wrote. And the places in the book were places that I really love and have been to. And so I felt like I got to revisit them as the Owens family went to visit them. So that was really fun for me to write about, and fun for them, I think, to be there. And it begins in Massachusetts and then it kind of circles back and ends in Massachusetts.
Yes, at the family home. So let's talk about love, because that's really ultimately, sorry, can you hear that? I don't know if you can hear that. Let's talk about love, because that's really the core of what this book is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a family that is cursed in
Right.
finding love. So it's a universal theme, right? We all are looking for it, I guess. And do you think that's ultimately how Kylie discovers who she really is, right? And is her.
Well, you know what I think? I think that what I realized in writing the book is that yes, it's about magic, but that love is the biggest part of magic. And it's not just romantic love. I mean, that's the curse. Was set by Maria Owens, the original member of the family. She's very hurt and wounded in love. And she doesn't think of it as a curse. She thinks of it as protection. That, she wants to protect the generations to come from being wounded by love. But if you do that, and that means you can't have love, that means it becomes a curse. And it's kind of like a family trauma that's passed down, like many of us have. But I think, the book is not just about romantic love. It's about, relationships between sisters and between mothers and daughters and between sisters and brothers. And so I think it's a lot about love and how important love is in all its many forms.
Well, and then also I felt like the family, right, and particularly the role of Vincent and the sisters, and when Jet is gone, it's Vincent comes back kind of to kind of fill that void, I guess you could say. But I loved particularly like the flashbacks to their memories, and the images of when they weren't supposed to swim, but they did get to go swim, and they would float. And I just loved those visuals of kind of seeing them floating, and not really know, like having power, but not really knowing what their power was, and and all of that.
I think in so many of our families, like things are hidden, they're supposed to protect you, to hide certain things about your family history. And in this case, it's, the fact that they're witches, even though everyone has some inkling that they're different than other people. And that's the other thing that these books are about, is that, it's okay to be different. You don't have to be normal. You don't have to be just like everybody else. I think that's a huge message in the book that was important to me growing up. And I think is still important, that you just, it's okay to be unique and individual and different than other people. And you don't have to be normal. Whatever that means, whatever normal means.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And as a mother of two teenagers, I feel like that's what I'm constantly talking about. Like,
Sure.
I don't care what anybody else does. I only care about what you do, and what's right for you.
Right.
So I love that. And it's funny because my son, he's 17, and he's a voracious reader, and kind of our first memory together reading, as I read Harry Potter to him when he was, I think, 4 or 5, and we ultimately kind of read all the books together. And he saw me reading this, and because he's always like anything to do with magic, and I was like, "Oh, Luke, you've got to read this series. I think you really love this whole series." So he's going to start now, but reading in it. So yeah. Okay, so with I have 2 questions for you, because we got asked this a lot when we announced that we were doing this chat, and a lot of people were like, "Well, if I haven't read the other books, can I read this book?" And I hadn't read the rest of the series, so I wasn't sure how to answer it. But then I did a little research online, and it seemed before I had read it that you could. And So, you know, we replied, yes, we thought that you could read it. And now having finished it, I definitely think that this book actually could be a standalone book by
Yeah.
itself, for sure. And at the very least, it encourages you now that you want to, of course, go back and learn more about the Owens if you haven't read these books. But was
Yeah.
that kind of is that your intent? Like, do you?
Well, I wanted people to be able to read each of the books and not have to read all of them, or to read all four of them. I think, you can read them either the way I wrote them, which is starting with Practical Magic and ending with the Book of Magic, or you could read them chronologically, which I think is what I might do if I was starting out, to start with Magic Lessons and then the Rules of Magic and then Practical Magic. And then the final book is the Book of Magic. But you certainly don't have to have read those books to read the Book of Magic and know what's going on at all.
So that can't be easy though, because you really have to be so careful in crafting your story that there
Yes.
aren't any presumptions or assumptions. And I have to imagine that you know these characters, so well, that can't be easy for you.
Yeah, I think I feel like, they kind of made their own lives and built their own lives. And all I had to do was kind of channel them in a way. But then, I mean, there was also a lot of work involved, but I think they kind of came alive they kind of walked through the door of my office, and I was lucky.
I love that. I love that analogy. Uh, so you mentioned that you're going to reread your early novel because there's some interest. Is there any interest in any of the other books in terms of screenplays or adaptations or movies?
Yes. Actually, the person who was the producer of Practical Magic, Denise Denovi, has the rights to the Rules of Magic and Magic Lessons and Practical Magics. And so there's there's hope that it will become a series about all the many different generations. We'll see.
Okay.
Be great.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we've learned this year in asking that question, though, it's a long road.
Oh, yeah.
And were you involved with Practical Magic in terms of the making of it?
I really wasn't. I mean, the person that really got that movie made was really Sandra Bullock. She read it. She decided to do it. She just really worked really hard to make it happen. I'm really grateful to her. And, they're just such incredible actresses in that movie. It's amazing. But I did not have anything to do with it.
Okay. So you just got to be a fan.
I got to be a fan, and I got to go and visit the kitchen, which I think is the best kitchen in any movie. So yeah, I got to be a fan.
That's so fun. That's awesome. So you'd kind of answered one question that I had, but if readers wanted to kind of go back, I think I just want to reiterate what you just said. You would maybe recommend not necessarily going back to the first one, but reading it. I think you said Magic Lessons first.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That takes place in the 17th century, and that's kind of the family's beginning.
Yeah. And then Rules of
Magic, which takes place in New York City in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. And then finishing with Practical Magic.
Yeah, Practical Magic. And then the Book of Magic is the last one.
Right. So, okay. So everybody note that. We'll certainly share that because that's interesting. I like that idea. And I'll certainly share that with my son now instead of having him start. What else would you recommend from all of your novels, if somebody wanted to go outside the magic piece of it? What's one of some of your personal loves? I mean, I know that they're all your babies, but
right, and they're all very different from each other. I have a book called The Dove Keepers, which takes place in ancient Judea. It's a historical novel about 4 women. I would recommend that, but also I have a very modern novel called Faithful, about a young woman who has a tremendous trauma and kind of heals herself by adopting stray dogs, which I think is a kind of interesting for this time when so many people are adopting dogs right now. I think, and I wrote a book called The Marriage of Opposites, which is about the painter Camille Pizarro's mother, Rachel. And she has a really interesting history. She's a character I really love. So, I don't know. It kind of depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions. And I must mention that I noticed that you have a beautiful sheepdog.
Shelby,
Yeah.
she's here somewhere. I don't know. She's asleep. That's her thing. She's asleep.
Well, I have a 10-month-old Bernedoodle. And at first, when I
Oh,
found Shelby, I thought, oh, is Shelby a Bernedoodle? But then I was like, nope,
no,
pure
she's
sheepdog.
totally sheepdog. Yeah, but I love Bernedoodles. How cute.
Yeah, she's actually in heat right now, so she's a little uncomfortable.
Wow.
Yeah. As she's running around the room now, it's like she heard her name.
Oh,
All right. So we always kind of like to end our chats with what you're currently reading and recommending. And is it fair to say that you're, I don't know, a lover of historical fiction because so much of your work is
not necessarily, I think I'm
okay.
kind of a writer, like I'm a reader. I'm very eclectic and I like all different things. I'll tell you, the book that I really fell in love with this year was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I don't know if you've read it,
Yes,
but it's such a
I have.
wonderful book. And he's a terrific writer, but such an especially wonderful book for this time when I think, a lot of people feel like very lost and searching and kind of what's the meaning of life kind of feeling. I think The Midnight Library, that's what I have recommended it to all my friends. And the other book that I just read, I don't read that much fiction because I'm writing fiction and I don't want to read someone else's book, but I had to take a break and read Elizabeth Strout's new book, Oh, William, because I love her writing and I just love her books. And it's a wonderful book. I don't think you have to read her other books about the same character, Lucy Barton, to read this book. I think it doesn't matter really. Her books are just wonderful.
They're absolutely fantastic. And it seems silly to ask this question since we're really truly kind of still celebrating publication. But can you talk about it? Are you working on anything? What's up next?
Yeah, I'm working on a biblical novel.
Ooh,
So there's a bit of research, but it's so far back in time. There's not much to. It's almost mythic more than it is, historical. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm really involved with it. So that's why I don't have time to read because I'm too busy writing right now.
right. And when do you expect to kind of? You have a goal of when you'll be
I
done with
think it
that?
might be out next fall.
Oh, okay,
See.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's pretty fast. And I can only imagine the the research that's required for some of your books.
Yeah.
What inspires you to, kind of come up with some of your ideas? Because
You know what? I literally have no idea sometimes. Sometimes it can be I'm
they
walking
just
through
come
a
to you.
museum and I see, and there's a Pizarro exhibit and it says something about Pizarro's mother. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. I don't know. It's just these little things that kind of I start to become interested in and do more research about. But to tell you the truth, right now in the past 2 years, it's been a great time to read and write because
Right.
life is more limited, and that's a real escape and kind of a treasure to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that, we were talking about at the beginning, but I think that that is why this group has, really blossomed as books during a really challenging time in our lives
Yeah.
served as a real form of escape from the reality that we
Yeah.
were all in. And, I think that that's probably what I'm most proud of is that we kind of were able to band together and help each other during a really challenging time. So
Yeah, I
I
think it's
am
great.
super thankful that you took time to join us.
Thank
And
you for
I
having me.
cannot wait to continue to share this book with all my friends and all the moms in the group I know will. And I love, I'm going to definitely go back and promote the reading order that we just talked about for the entire series. So thank you so much.
Thank
Do you have
you.
big plans for Halloween? Do you do anything special?
Just going to answer my door and give out a couple of Reese's pieces.
That's so
Thanks for
fun.
having me.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.